Welcome back to another episode of Boom or Bust, your home for NFL Draft Talk. I'm your host, Terry, and today talking about positional value in the draft, my philosophy when it comes to that whole thing. But I think kicking it off with this conversation, we got to talk about Quenton Nelson. So this is kind of what sparked the conversation for me, at least. Quenton Nelson, so I kind of went back and forth with that. And him and, kind of really thinking about what type of prospect he is. Now, for me, real quick, he was always a 5-star prospect after my first evaluation. I didn't have him as my number one guard. I had, Will Hernandez as my number one. Like, I'm talking about by centimeters, just because, actually on limited tape. But, after the second round evaluation, you know, that close, apples to apples, and then certain small things, I put Nelson back as number one, especially because of his natural power, and, you know, a little bit of a higher ceiling, but still those two are neck and neck. So it was all good, but then I actually did this mock draft game, which I talk about for the Bears fans, but kind of going through this process in this game, and I'm acting as the Bears in the game. And I didn't have a chance to draft Quenton Nelson, but I did get a chance to draft Will Hernandez. And I just thought, like, cause Hernandez actually, in our mock draft game, he fell to the second round. And not to say that's gonna happen in real life, but either way, I'm just like, I, as, you know, personally, not everybody else, but I evaluate these guys darn near neck and neck. One of them goes in the top 10, one of them goes in the second round. How could that be possible? I mean, of course, some people might not have the talent levels the same as I do, but even still, overall, I'm just like, that's a little weird. So that kind of got me thinking, that Hernandez, if he came to my team or anybody's team, what would he do? What would he do stepping in right away as a starter? What would he be able to do? And then thinking about Quenton Nelson, what would he be able to do? And I don't see much difference, to be honest. And this isn't about Nelson versus Hernandez. I think Nelson's the top prospect. I think his height helps as well with his arm length. I think they both had the same grabbing problems. I'm not going to get into the technical part, but it's not about them versus each other. It's about the position of guard. And so we're not talking about Zach Martin, who played tackle, at Notre Dame and center and guard. We're not talking about, you know, a 5-way player. We're talking about a guard, a guy who's a guard. Probably could be a center. He's 6'5", arms are decently long for a guard, but he's not tackle size. And even if he was tackle size, he don't have tackle feet. And so you're talking about a guy that's a guard. What is that actual, value of that position? And so we've heard that talk before. And for me, the way I've always felt was, if you're going to get a all-star, you know, or Pro Bowl or all-pro type player, doesn't matter where. If you could say, I know in the future this guy's going to be an all-pro, doesn't matter where. You know, you think about a Tom Brady or anything else, like always, you know, when people say, oh man, but his draft stock or he's not ranked here. I'm like, okay, well, if we did the draft over with Tom Brady, do you think he's going to go the 199th pick? With people knowing what they know? Of course not. And so if they're going to be good, does it matter where you get them? And for me, it was always no, of course not. I mean, and that's the best thing about the draft is that there can be talent all over the place. And so that was always my thing. So I wasn't too caught up in draft stock per se. Position, I was the same way, but now I'm thinking, okay, well, that's true. All that is still true. But the main two factors we got to take into account. Number one, you don't know the future. So everybody, they keep talking about, well, you know, you can have this or we got needs here. That's not our most pressing need. And the first thing they say with Quenton Nelson, would you rather take a gamble on a position player or take a guy that's a guaranteed Pro Bowl or a 10-year starter or a guaranteed future Hall of Famer, guaranteed All-Pro, whatever words, hyperbole they use? Which one would you rather have? And in hypothetical, the answer is easy. But the draft's not hypothetical. The draft is reality. In reality, we don't know that Quenton Nelson is a guaranteed Hall of Famer, Pro Bowler, All-Star, anything. And just like every other prospect. So while we talk about safe prospects and whatnot, yes, that's a conversation, but nothing you say in the NFL draft is an absolute lock. And so when we're talking about safe picks, we know that with a grain of salt, that's still a very high chance that, or not high chance, but still chance that they won't work out. And so, yes, we can talk hypothetically, but in the actual draft, you don't know what he's going to be. So then I take it one step further. Even if he was going to be a great, like, again, hypothetically, just say, for whatever reason, he's going to be a 10-year plus starter. He's going to go to multiple Pro Bowls and multiple All-Pros. Okay. Now the other part that people don't think of is opportunity cost. So the term in economics of when you're pursuing one opportunity, you also have to factor in what are you giving up to pursue that opportunity. So let's say I decided I wanted to go out with my friends for a party, a late night party. So yes, I know I'm going to have the party. That's what I'm doing. But what am I giving up to go to that party? I'm giving up hours of sleep, or I'm giving up hours that I could be working on whatever hobbies I have. Whatever it is, these are the things, you could be doing instead. And so that has to be, even though it's kind of more of not a hypothetical, it's not a physical, tangible type cost, but it is something you got to take into account. That's what they call opportunity cost. So while I know that this guard is going to be all pro, what am I giving up to get Quenton Nelson? And I'm missing out on a chance, let's just say Roquan Smith. So if I knew Roquan Smith was going to be a 10-year plus starter All-Pro, same as Quenton Nelson, then I got to be able to say which one is more valuable. And that's what it comes down to. So we got hypotheticals, we got this and that, but what it comes down to is putting these people on an even plane. Even plane. So if we look at whoever, let's say the quarterbacks, if I look at Sam Darnold and I look at Josh Allen, and I say both of them hit their peak potential, which one is higher? And so you could obviously have objective or subjective opinions about which one has a higher ceiling. And they play the same position, so the impact of that position is the same. But when you're looking at different positions, then you're talking about something different. So if I'm looking at Josh Rosen at his peak versus Quenton Nelson at his peak, what's the impact of a quarterback versus the impact of a guard? And so this is where people got to start digging into a little more of the nuance, because I don't think anybody would argue that quarterback's the most important position on the field. And people always say that, and I think some people just go with the mantra, but the reason it's the most important on the field is because it has the most potential to impact the game. Touching the ball every time and distributing the ball, whether it's a handoff or a pass play, making those decisions with the pass play and distributing it, making checks and calls and audibles, those are all up to the quarterback. They affect the game the most. And so when they're at their highest level, they impact the game the most. So they have the most value. And so I don't think anybody will argue that. And then you just kind of got to go by position. Do different teams value different positions differently? Of course. Quarterback is probably the same, but then you talk about different schemes and philosophies, it'll be different. But overall, for a team, you got to weigh that out. And I don't think any team or any person listening would sit here and try to tell you that a guard outweighs most positions, especially defensive positions. And the reason I would say that especially is because when you got, there's a lot of positions that depend on other positions. or other people to do their job. So like offensive line, you got to depend on 4 other guys. I mean, even if you do your job to a all-pro level like Joe Thomas, the rest of those guys aren't up to snuff. The O-line's not good, or the job can't be completed. You might have did your part, but you're 1/5 of that line. And so what you do is going to be affected by the rest of that line. And then, of course, in the run game, it's going to be affected by the running back. And then even in the pass game, the quarterback. Look at Mike McGlinchey. Everyone talking crap about him. Look at that quarterback. The reason he was getting sacked is because he was running around all day and not making decisions. And so, yes, those are affected by a lot of things. Receivers. You can beat your guy one-on-one and have all the ability in the world. If the quarterback throws the ball out of bounds every time you throw it to you, you're not going to make no catches. And so, while a lot of the getting open and even bad passes, it's up to you to make that play. At the end of the day, you still need that quarterback, especially to be high level. So those are, and then of course quarterback has to rely on everybody. So those offense positions, those positions, they tend to rely on somebody. So even if Quenton Nelson, you got him on your team and he was all pro and the rest of the O-line sucked, it won't really matter. He might not even be all pro because nobody's going to produce. And so while you're talking about, okay, do we take Quenton Nelson or do we take a Denzel Ward or Minkah Fitzpatrick? Corners, they don't rely as much. I mean, pressure helps them, but even if there's no pressure, then they have to have the cover skills to cover a guy. I mean, more times than not, you're going to be one-on-one, and whatever. If it's a zone, you're going to be whoever got in your zone. If it's man, of course, you manned up. So yeah, sometimes the safety help or whatever, but more times than not, you one-on-one. Same thing goes for a safety, depending on the call. But like a lot of times, they are kind of on the island. They do their things. Linebackers, it helps to have D linemen take up blocks, but it's up to you to get off blocks if somebody tries to block you and go make a play. So, you could still affect the game without having those guys in front of you. It's not the same as offense. So when you're talking about picking Quenton Nelson over potential other players and you're saying, okay, Quenton Nelson at his peak, Tremaine Edmonds at his peak, which one's more valuable? I don't see how you get to the guard. I honestly don't. And as much as people talk about hyperbole with Nelson because he might be safe, the fact is he doesn't have any skills that we've never seen before at the guard position. Even if he is a Hall of Famer, we've seen those Hall of Famer type guards. So there's nothing that Nelson is bringing to me that makes it like top 5. I mean, I think of the guys I loved in the past. David DeCastro, one of the guys I thought was going to be amazing. And he ends up being pretty good, of course. Brandon Albert, who actually was a guard, and I thought he was going to be an absolute knockout guard, but ended up playing tackle, which was fine. I mean, you think about the highest guys that end up having great careers. At guard, like, you just can't justify to me taking them that high. I mean, if you close to being complete, or you feel like that's the piece, okay, fine. Or even if you got a line that's one guard away or interior that's one guard away. Okay, I could get it. But when you got a pressing need somewhere else and you're going to pass up one of these other guys, it's tough for me. Now, like receiver, running back, position value, would I go that up against a guard? Probably. I mean, because a guard there's going to be less top-notch guards than there are running backs and receivers, because they're dime a dozen. You can find running backs and receivers throughout the draft that can do a great job. Will you find all stars at receiver lower? Not always. AB. I mean, it happens, but you can find guys to fill the role. Guards, it's going to be a handful each year, and centers. So for me, that's what kind of opened it up. I look at Nelson, I look at Hernandez. I'm like, I'll be fine getting either one. Why is the price for one so much higher? And I'm not sitting here saying that Nelson's going to fall or go lower than people think. I don't know. I mean, I think I'll have to make a decision before the draft, just because usually each year there's guys that I feel like are going to shock and fall. And so I do want to make a definitive statement later, but right now I don't know. I don't know what the teams think, But I know for me personally, I just don't see a way to justify it. I mean, again, the one thing people only say is that, man, he's guaranteed tenure. Like, there's no guarantee. Even if he stepped in and was the baddest dude on the team, wrecking shop training camp, he could get hurt. And so there is no guarantee. And we could say the what ifs. I mean, yeah, I wouldn't blame you if he got hurt. I wouldn't say, oh, you made a bad pick. No, of course not. But I'm just saying there are no guarantees. One way or the other. By hook or by crook, there's no guarantees. And so you even take an injury out, you can't sit here and guarantee me what Quenton Nelson's going to do 100%. You can't do that. And so that's usually what people say. And I understand that. I get that. And then my other question is, even still, if we're looking at him at his peak versus somebody else at their peak, what position impacts the game more? And that's all I really think it comes down to. And I guess deeper into my philosophy, like as I mentioned, yeah, I'm not with the running backs in the first round type thing. And I've always said, as people keep calling this a passing league, I've always said it's going to circle back. It's going to be cyclical. We're going to come back to power run. And not only power run, but bell cows. And we're here. People laughed at me 5 years ago, like, or whatever year Breeze broke 5,000 yards. People laughed at me. I'm like, okay, we'll see. And we see. I mean, committee is good and it can work, but the real value is having that guy that can do it all 3 downs and that can be a workhorse. And so we're getting back to that point. We're seeing backs going in the first round. Again, if I was one running back away, maybe. But personally, I wouldn't go for those guys in the first. It's just too many running backs. And your running back is going to be more predicated on your O-line, no matter how good the running back is. Receivers going to be more predicated on how good your quarterback is. There's top flight guys that can make a quarterback look good. But even still, I would rather have my quarterback in order before I worry about reaching for a receiver. So I don't think they're a dime a dozen where I would skip a receiver in the first. Definitely not. If there's a Calvin Johnson and I feel like he's going to do it, I would feel comfortable taking him. But like a Calvin Ridley who's just really, really, really good, but I don't feel like he's a dominant force, I would wait on him. Or I would skip him for some of the other guys in this draft. So, positionally, I don't have a problem with interior linemen in the first round. I do have a problem in the top 10. Like that's steep. Depending on my roster, like if I'm a playoff team that got somebody else's pick and I happen to be in the top 10, cool. But if I'm building a roster, like a Bears roster, that's a little expensive. And tackles, of course, you gotta, take your chance with those. So I'm pretty traditional with the positional value for the most part. But yeah, I do think positional value is a big, nuance that a lot of draft fans don't really, check out. So anyway, want to hear from you. Go to the comment section. Let me know. I know there's the Quenton Nelson fan. Don't get it twisted. He's a 5-star prospect. I'm doing my grades right now. He's going to be a 5-star prospect. He's the best guard in the draft. I'm just saying, is it worth taking a guard at that position? And so, or at that position in the draft. So go to the comment section. Let me know what you think about Nelson and positional value of different things. Thumbs up, subscribe, share it around, and thank you for listening.